Hello and welcome. So in this video I will show you Portainer, which is pretty much my favorite tool when it comes to managing all the Docker containers that belong to my project, my work, my smart home, my 3D printer, and who knows what. So let's go, let's check it out. Okay, I will do the whole demonstration on a virtual machine, but basically you can do it in any Linux machine or actually on Windows too, but personally I don't really recommend using Docker on Windows because of various problems. I would say with this video and with some basic Docker knowledge you will be pretty fine with using Linux, even if you don't have too much experience with Linux. So let me start up this VM. This VM is basically prepared for Docker and Docker Compose. It's just barebone Ubuntu Linux with SSH daemon, so I can log in, and Docker and Docker Compose installed, but that's it. Otherwise it's just an empty Linux installation. So at this point we can log into our virtual machine for some basic installation. Now logging in, you can do it here with this window provided by VirtualBox. But to be honest, I don't really find this convenient enough, so I will just use another tool. This is called Putty, and it's a free tool. If you're not familiar with it, you can just use it to log in remotely to any machine. So this is the IP of the VM I'm running here, running on a standard SSH port and whatnot. So this will open up a window, and this window is basically the same as the one run by VirtualBox, but Putty's editor and history and copy paste and stuff like that, these are just more convenient, so I will just rely on Putty. Also, to make it more visible, just let me change my font settings. Okay, here we go. So this is the default login to the machine. I usually just create the same user for each of my VMs. So when you install Ubuntu, you will have to provide a username and the password for the default user anyway, but those are outside the context of this tutorial. So just let's see, we have Docker, yeah, and we have Docker Compose. Now the first thing we need to do is we're pulling Portainer by Docker. Pulling means that we are getting the image from the default repository, which is called Docker Hub. So let's just say Docker pull Portainer here we go. So this takes some time to download, and yeah, that's it, Portainer is downloaded. Now we can go and check Portainer's documentation to see what we need to configure to run it successfully within Docker. So let's do that. To get to this page, the easiest thing to do is just type Portainer and Docker Hub into Google, but I will link it in the description anyway. So here we go. As you can see, not too much extra information, but we have a section called Deploy Portainer here, and we will see some Docker configuration. Basically the thing is that Portainer needs some place to store its data, like settings and password and whatnot. So we will set up Docker volume for it. A volume is, simply put, a directory or folder that is managed by Docker and that is mounted to the container. So what we need to do is to create a volume and then run a Portainer. Now this whole thing looks a bit complicated, to be honest. I prefer Docker Compose for this. So with Docker Compose we will just create a configuration file for the whole thing and use that file to create everything we need with a single command. So we don't have to type commands this long. And also here's some instructions for the Windows fanatics. Again, I'm not going into details regarding Windows here. Okay, so let's switch back to our VM and let's create a Docker Compose file. So let's make a folder. And then we need some text editor to create the file. It should be named docker compose.yaml, and I've cheated a bit because I created this already and I'm just pasting it here, but let me explain what's going on. So if you're not familiar with Docker Compose, it's just basically a tool on top of Docker that makes you able to, instead of those long commands, just create configuration files like this. And basically what you see here is pretty much the same that is on the documentation I have shown before. So we provide the image, which means we are using the latest version of Portainer. Then we have this port mapping, which means that Portainer is running on port 9000, and we will open up 9000. So actually outside world, meaning your computer, you are running the Docker container on, or actually other computers in the network or PCs, mobile phones, whatnot, can access it via this port, plus with the IP address of the Docker host, but we will get back to that later. Then we have some required other stuff, this docker.sock file. I'm not going into details with that. This is very specific to Portainer, so let's just leave it alone. And then we have a mapping. So Portainer expects to have a /data folder, which means a folder named data, under the root, and we are just binding it to a volume. So again, a volume is a local folder on the Docker host, on the host operating system, which is mapped into the container, and the program running within the container thinks it's actually a folder, I mean a normal folder. So it's like another level of virtualization. And we have this, which means that once we have started this Docker container, it should be always restarted. So if you are restarting the machine, the container will also restart. Okay, and basically that's it. We can now save this file. Yes, I want to save it with that name, and at this point we can say docker compose up, which means a container should be created based on this description and these parameters. So let's do that. And if everything goes well, then you can see messages like this. Now at this point we have Portainer up and running, and yeah, it is this fast. It's not the machine that is insanely fast, but Portainer is very lightweight application. So let's open Portainer. As I said, Portainer is running on port 9000 on your Docker host's IP. In my case, the Docker host was a virtual machine, as you might remember, so its IP address is this one, and now I am adding the port. And here we go, this is the default login screen. So first time you're logging into Portainer, I mean a fresh installation, you will have to provide a password and an admin username. If you're not doing this within 15 minutes of starting the container, then as far as I remember, the whole installation will render itself unusable, and just to protect it, because actually Portainer is pretty powerful tool, and if you're forgetting to set this admin user and someone can just log in from your network, like a school network or work network or something like that, then that guy can actually do a lot of damage on your Docker containers. So let this be your first thing to do right after you have installed Portainer. So now I'm just setting up a password here. And here we go. No, I don't want to have it. And I'm dismissing this. Okay, so as you can see here, I mean, I will go quickly through the various items within Portainer's main menu, but this is the screen you're greeted with, and you can see it says primary, one stack, one container, whatnot. So actually it shows itself, because as I mentioned in the start of this video, Portainer is, and as you can see obviously, Portainer is also a Docker container, so it's natural that it will show itself as a container. And you might ask, what is a stack? A stack is basically specific to Docker Compose, because when you are running a container via that long command like this, then you are starting a container. However, within a Docker Compose file, you can specify multiple containers, and when you have a file and you have multiple containers, then those together are called a stack, because you can define dependencies between them, like multiple pieces of software depending on each other, calling each other via various ports and communicating to each other and whatnot, communicating with each other, sorry. So that's what we call a stack. Also, this other view is the containers view, which will list all the containers regardless of which stack they are running in. The given stack will be mentioned here in this column. Then we have images. Images, basically this is the list of images we are using for our containers. Then we have networks. Networks are basically pretty much the same when you are setting up multiple routers in your home, and those routers are creating each of their own separate subnet. So within Docker, you can imagine the whole thing, the whole Docker host, as a network, and within the network each stack can define its own subnet, like only the applications running within that stack can communicate with each other, or they can be actually configured to communicate with other stacks and so on. So actually Docker's networking can be pretty much complicated and can be created with pretty advanced settings. So I'm not going into details. You can see your networks here. If you are just setting up a single network with a single stack, then you will just see the default network name here for your stack. And yeah, that's it. Volumes. This is the list of volumes we have created, again, regardless of the stack they belong to. As you can see, we have a lot of various data and whatnot, but let me show you some cool stuff. So let's get back to the dashboard and let's get to our container. So we can see the logs of the container here. If the container is running, it's not necessarily started manually, because yeah, for example, you have just restarted your Docker host and you have no intention to go into a SSH connection and start everything manually. That's why there's that parameter called restart with the value always. So it will just restart on its own, and in that case you won't see the log output in a terminal window or something like that, but you can check it here. Also, one funny thing is that you can directly open a console right into that container. Assuming your container supports it, you can use this feature to have an actual interactive terminal session right into the container, so you can log in, take a look around, see the file system, see the mounted volumes from the inside of the container and whatnot. So this is actually a pretty useful feature. Now let me show you some other advanced features of Portainer and explain why I really like it. So, getting back to dashboard and to our container. So you can stop a container, restart, start, kill, whatnot, even pause, which to be honest I don't even know how to do via command line. I've never done it. You can also get various information like how much memory, CPU does it use, and so on. So pretty advanced stuff. Then so you can see actually a lot of info. Also you can change stuff like connecting, so interactively change the network it belongs to. Then you can just take it out from the network and so on. So a lot of stuff to do. And then when we go to stacks, you can add the stack. And this is what I really like. So you don't even have to, once you have Portainer installed, you don't even have to log in to your Docker host anymore. You can just use this screen to create stacks. You can use this editor to edit a Docker Compose file here, or you can use a Git repository, or you can upload it from your PC. Then you can have a lot of settings and whatnot, and you can use this screen to deploy a stack. And then when you are at stacks, you can manage it. Unfortunately, you cannot manage this stack because it says control is limited. Stack was created outside of Portainer. But every stack you create with this button will be manageable. So you will be able to do some changes to them, to bring them up, bring them down, and so on. So it's really useful and really handy. And again, this whole thing, the whole Portainer, can just live in your Docker host and won't even take a noticeable amount of resources. Also, there are settings and a lot of stuff I haven't discovered personally. You can have multiple users, teams, roles, so not just the admin user, but in most of the cases, I guess, unless you have a Docker host managed by various people, assuming it's your smart home or your home network, then you will probably just rely on the administrator user, the default one you have created with your custom set password. One thing I almost forgot to mention is that you don't even need Docker Compose or Docker Compose files or whatnot. You can just use Portainer to really quickly deploy single container within the default network with some default settings. So let's go and see, like, you can go to images and let's say we are pulling Pi-hole. This is pretty much the equivalent of that Docker pull command I used at the start of this video. And as I mentioned, you don't really have to log in again via command line. So you can see it pulled Pi-hole, it says unused. And then we can go to containers, we can add the container, you can select here. It actually will help you selecting it because I just pasted pi-hole and it offered that we have an image with the latest version of Pi-hole. Then you can select whether you always want to pull the image or not. It's okay because we just pulled it. You can give a name of the name for this container and whatnot, and we can have various settings here. So again, this is like avoiding the Docker command line fully. Now in case of Pi-hole, we have a lot of settings to do and whatnot, but we don't need a working Pi-hole installation right now. So let's just assume ignore these. So ports, who cares? Environment, volumes. If we don't define volumes, it won't be able to store its data, but we don't care. We just want to have the container up and running, because why not? You can create those ports here and whatnot. So leaving everything on default, you can say let's deploy that container. And it also generated some stupid default name to it because we didn't even care to provide a name. And you can see no stack, which means it's running with the default Docker network and whatnot. We haven't published ports, so it won't be reachable from the outside. But it's already says starting, and we can see its logs. So actually it seems to be up and running already. Yeah, Pi-hole enabled and whatnot. So we just deployed Pi-hole in Docker without any command line. Okay, I guess that's it. We can see it's working, and we could see this as a quick demonstration of how powerful Portainer is. So what do you think of this video? It was a bit longer than my usual stuff, but I really tried to put as much information as I could into this single hands-on-like experience with Portainer. Again, I really suggest you to try Portainer. It's free, it's easy to use, and it's really, really powerful. Also regarding this video, if you have any feedback, any idea, please don't hesitate to share it in the comments. And if you like the video, then please consider subscribing to the channel. That helps me a lot. Thank you, and see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, hit like. If you want to help my channel and see more of my content, hit subscribe. If you want to check out behind the scenes and want to know more about me, then follow me on social media. You can find the links here. Thank you again, and see you next time.